Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are tackling something literally monumental. We are going to summarize the entire biblical narrative in under 10 minutes. Now, you might be thinking, no way, because it's this incredibly vast collection of writings spanning thousands of years, multiple genres, and some really heavy themes. But we're going to distill it right down to its foundational storyline using the source texts directly. To pull this off efficiently without getting lost in the weeds, we're going to follow a strict chronological arc. First, origins and the fall. Then, covenants and the law. 3, wisdom and the prophets. 4, the new covenant. 5, living the faith. And finally, number 6, the final hope. Let's get right into it with section 1, origins and the fall, the beginning of the narrative. So, starting at the very beginning of Genesis, the text hits the gas pedal immediately. The narrative establishes this rapid succession of early events. We move from a flawless creation built in just 6 days, where everything is emphatically declared very good, straight into humanity's rebellion in Eden. We see Adam, made from dust, exiled from the garden, and then the timeline just accelerates. By the time Adam is 130 years old, he fathers Seth, but it's in his own fallen image. Humanity's wickedness grows so intense that by Noah's 600th year, a devastating flood wipes the slate entirely clean, saving only those inside the ark. Not long after that, the story pivots sharply, zooming in on one specific guy, Abram, who is called at age 75 to pack up and depart Haran for a promised land. That brings us to section 2, covenants and the law, bridging the gap. So how do we go about restoring that fractured relationship from Eden? Well, the text introduces a huge turning point. The covenant. Instead of dealing with the whole world all at once, the narrative starts to narrow its focus. God makes this everlasting covenant with Noah, hanging a literal rainbow in the clouds as a sign that he'll never flood the earth again. From there, the focus sharpens even further onto Abraham. Now, despite Abraham being old and totally childless, the text tells us God promises him offspring as numerous as the stars in heaven and the dust of the earth. It's a formal, binding promise that a future nation is coming. Fast forward a bit to Moses. The promised nation of Israel, it's a reality now. But, millions of people need rules. Here we see the arrival of the 10 Commandments written on stone tablets. This establishes the law, complete with the Sabbath as a permanent sign, as a highly structured yet ultimately temporary solution for the people to relate to a holy God. It's a really rigorous, complex system of rules and sacrifices. Moving right along to section 3, wisdom and the prophets. Reflection and indictment. As we move linearly into the wisdom literature, books like Ecclesiastes, things get incredibly reflective. The authors are grappling with the human condition and, quite frankly, humanity's continuous failure to actually keep all those rules we just talked about. The author of Ecclesiastes points out that while we are totally bound to earthly cycles, a time to be born, a time to die, the reality that we all return to dust, there is this deep, unresolved longing inside of us. As the text says, God has put eternity into man's heart. We're these finite creatures walking around with an infinite craving that earthly rituals just can't satisfy. And while the poets are reflecting, the prophets are entering the scene, throwing down some seriously sharp indictments. These books highlight a major problem. The people were keeping the outward rituals of the law, but they'd lost the heart of it entirely. In the book of Micah, the prophet asks rhetorically if God wants thousands of rams or rivers of oil, these massive, superficial sacrifices. The answer is a resounding no. What's actually required is genuine justice, kindness, and humility. The prophets are pointing out a massive failure in the human heart that animal sacrifices just aren't fixing. Which leads us to section 4, the new covenant, the paradigm shift. All of this perfectly illustrates the text's built-in need for a permanent fix, right? This is introduced in the New Testament as a massive paradigm shift known as the new covenant. The author of Hebrews explains this by introducing Jesus as the ultimate high priest. But there's a really interesting twist here. He's not from the mortal earthly line of Aaron that was set up in the law of Moses. Instead, he's from an eternal order. The text likens him to a mysterious ancient figure from back in Genesis named Melchizedek, the king of righteousness who had no recorded genealogy. This is huge because it signifies a priesthood based on an indestructible life rather than just a temporary mortal lineage. The text sets up a wildly vivid contrast between these two systems. Under the Old Covenant, you had an earthly tent, repeated animal sacrifices that could never actually clear a guilty conscience, and priests who, frankly, kept dying.
It was a ministry literally carved on stone. But the new covenant? It features a heavenly tent. It requires only a single, once-for-all sacrifice, mediated by an eternal priest. And instead of writing laws on cold stone tablets, this new covenant writes the law directly onto human hearts by the Spirit. It's a total game changer.
Now for Section 5, Living the Faith. Practical application. So, if the old law is set aside for this new covenant of grace, how are believers supposed to actually go about their daily lives? Well, the New Testament epistles fire off these rapid, highly practical instructions for this new community. The grace of the new covenant is definitely not a license to just do whatever you want. It's a call to profound transformation. They are commanded to speak the truth, to step up and bear one another's burdens, and to absolutely reject showing partiality to the rich. In fact, the book of James emphatically states that faith without action is entirely useless. He even jokes that demons believe God exists, and they shudder. True faith has to result in overcoming evil with good.
The Apostle Paul makes this incredibly visual in his letters to the Colossians and Ephesians. He explicitly contrasts our old, corrupt earthly nature, stuff like anger, wrath, malice, and slander, with what he calls the new self. He tells believers to literally put off that old self and put on the new self, almost like changing your clothes. And this new wardrobe? It consists of compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, and above all love, which he says binds the whole shebang together in perfect harmony.
Let's move to our final section, Section 6, The Final Hope, the Ultimate Victory. We are bringing it all home now. We've gone from the fall, through the law and prophets, into the new covenant and daily living. And here, the text creates this beautiful, full thematic circle. 1 Corinthians contrasts the very first man from Genesis, Adam, made of dust whose natural body brought the fall and death, with Jesus, who is referred to as the last Adam. This last Adam isn't from the dust, he is from heaven. He is a life-giving spirit who brings a spiritual body and imperishable life. It perfectly counters the tragedy we saw back in the opening chapters. According to Hebrews and the epistles, this current world, with all its messy desires and struggles, is passing away. The grand narrative promises that Christ will appear a second time. And crucially, this time it is not to deal with sin as a sacrifice, but to finalize the salvation of those who are eagerly waiting for him, finally granting them that promised eternal inheritance. I want to leave you with this incredibly provocative, triumphant taunt from 1 Corinthians. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? It highlights the grand narrative's ultimate claim of absolute victory over humanity's oldest problem, our mortality and separation from our Creator. It brings this entire 10-minute summary to a powerful close, leaving us to wonder, how does this ancient, enduring promise echo in the reality of your own life today?